Okay.
Today, you are meeting another one of my amazing friends. I'm so happy to have Dr. Wendy Ibrahim with us today. Dr. Wendy is such a beautiful soul, a bright light. She is a healer. She wants to bring healing to our world. She's nurturing and caring. And she's one of my COVID gifts. And I say a COVID gift because this time has actually provided opportunity to draw us closer to people who we probably would have never met had it not happened. So I'm really excited to introduce you to this phenomenal human being. And I know that you will gain from her gentle wisdom. We share a common philosophy, and so I feel like we're soul sisters. I just told her that earlier. I said, "You're my soul fam."
Yeah.
Yes, you are. So, welcome, Dr. Wendy.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you for having me. It's always a pleasure to talk to you.
It-
Always. And it's also nice to start hearing positive perspectives on myself from you. So thank you for that.
Absolutely. So, will you tell us more about you, please?
Yes, I am. What shall I start to tell you about me? Well, I want to start with how I ended up reaching out to you
Hmm.
about a year ago now. I think a little bit after the world shutdown happened, and I had really developed this belief that this time of COVID and this time of disruption was an incredible opportunity for us to reshape the human story. That we were getting a gift, a divine gift of a pause to really look and reflect at who we are and what we wanted to be, where we had made mistakes, and how we wanted to move forward. And as your work started to come into my virtual world, I saw a common philosophy, and I knew that I wanted to connect with you, and we have been connecting throughout the year, and it's been a really wonderful process of connecting with people, like-minded people, people who listen with their hearts. And I guess if that's one thing that I want to start by telling you about me is that I really try and cultivate listening with my heart. I feel like my heart is my spiritual organ, my actual heart, and then my heart space. And that I believe that that's the space where the creator speaks to us. And I am always looking for more information about how to move forward. I believe my purpose here on this planet is to help make the world a better place, leave it better than I found it. And so I'm always looking to collaborate with others who can do that with me.
Absolutely.
So that's the essence of who I am.
That's the essence of who you are. Can you tell us a little bit more? I know you talked about what your purpose is, but how does that translate into your work, the work that you're doing?
Right.
Mhm.
So my professional life has been a really interesting collection of experiences, and all of them are really geared towards helping people in some way. And so my academic background is that I am a kind of study nerd. I love to study. I have 4 university degrees. I have bachelor's degrees in both psychology and education, and then my master's degree is in organizational psychology, and my PhD is in natural health. And so I feel like I've been studying my whole life how humans are with each other.
Mhm.
So, how they take care of themselves emotionally, how they learn, how we take care of each other or not take care of each other in groups, and then the essence of wellness. And so that's kind of where my academic background has come from. And then my work life has been I say in some of my bios that I'm as comfortable on the sidewalk as I am in the boardroom. And
Mhm.
so I've had the opportunity in my life to do some really amazing outreach and build some beautiful connections with people who are homeless, living with mental illness. That was my work for 6 years of my life. And I also sit on advisory boards for high level politicians and, everything in between. And so I really strive to have an experience that intersects with as many differences as
Mm.
possible. And I know one of the things you want to unpack with me today is that hasn't always been my story, right? That's been something that has evolved. Being able to be a person that is able to sit at the table and be in conversations, meaningful conversations with a wide variety of people. And that's been something I've developed across my life.
Yes. That's one of the things that admire about you most is that you have this, your identity is not really rooted in what is. It's very much heart-centered. And I want to tell this funny story, but when I first met you, I assumed you were a fair-skinned Middle Eastern woman, um, Muslim woman, and you're not. Um, and you own your ancestry. After having conversations with you, you own it in a way that many don't. And I can assume that you get a lot of assumptions about your identity and who you are. And I think that a lot of us are struggling with identity. And so I would love for you to kind of go into how you have navigated those waters, because it is difficult.
Yeah, it is. It's interesting. So yes, I'm Muslim and I wear a headscarf. It's called a hijab, and that's a religious choice that I made. I converted to Islam in 1998. Well, I formally converted in 1998. I feel like God decided I was Muslim in 1997, and that's a whole story I'm actually writing a book about. But 8 years after that, I decided to take on the headscarf, and I went from being, a white identified woman who was in the world perceived as a white woman and all that went with that, to being different suddenly and walking in a different space. So a lot of times I think people assume that I'm maybe North African, like Moroccan or Algerian. I've had some people think that I'm from Turkey. I'm actually a native New Englander, about as native as you can get. My maiden name is Manchester, and my dad's side of the family and parts of my mom's side of the family were some of the earliest colonists to come to this country. The stories you see of the Pilgrims and the first Thanksgiving and all of that stuff, those were my people, and that's my genetic lineage. And you and I have talked about this before, but our DNA has memory for 14 generations. So when I think back to those times, 14 generations ago, that's still living and breathing inside of me. And so I feel like as much damage as has been caused by colonialism, I feel like I'm in a place where I can be part of the story of healing the damages of colonialism. But my story of embracing my whiteness and the impact of my whiteness came years before I even went to Egypt and converted to Islam. Um, I I got most of my education first here in New England, and then had the opportunity to move to Seattle, and was living and working in Seattle, in my first ever multiracial team of people. I was working with Black people for the first time, and had no idea. Like, I got into a conflict with one of my African American colleagues, and his response to me surprised me. He was very angry with me. He told me that I shouldn't be telling him what to do, that I had no right to correct his behavior. And I had no idea, being a white woman from New England,
Mm.
what people saw me as. And I was really lucky at that time because I had a manager who was all about healing racial issues. And he held me accountable and held the other gentleman accountable. And we took it very seriously as a microcosm for us to work through these perceptions we had about each other, because I had no idea that I had bias towards him. I hadn't ever had any opportunity to think about that or unpack that. And it happened to be the year that the Malcolm X movie had come out.
Mm.
And so my manager gave that to me as an assignment and supervision one week. He's like, you have to go to the cinema. You have to go see Malcolm X. You have to understand the history. And then we can sit down and have a conversation, because he's like, you totally don't get it. Why this colleague of yours is looking at you in your, Manchester, white woman from Boston area, and all that came with that. So I'm still grateful. I've lost touch with that manager, but I'm super grateful for him for taking the time to educate me and help me have a different perspective.
Mm.
And so after it was that experience and going to grad school, that I ended up in Egypt. And by then my heart and my eyes were opened up. And then I was in this whole other world, much like Malcolm X had gone through. I don't know if you remember the movie, but Malcolm X had come to Islam, and then he was very segregated in his thinking. And then he went to Mecca, to the pilgrimage, and was breaking bread with people from all ethnicities, from all around the world. And so I got this blessing to go into a world where unity and oneness is part of the story of the society and part of the story of the faith. So yeah, that was a lot, but that's some of the highlights of my journey.
That was great. And I love to kind of like pull back and sometimes look at our life and say, oh, look how that's connected, right? And you just made this beautiful connection from you watching the Malcolm X movie and, remembering and recalling and having his experience there. And then years later, you're in the same position. And now, now what happens when you're in Egypt? And I know you lived abroad there for a while, and then you had an experience that brought you and your family back.
Right. So my first experience living there was from 1997 to 1999.
Okay.
And that is when I actually went into my experience going to Egypt feeling like it was going to be all about pyramids and hieroglyphics. Like that was, I had studied it in elementary school. I always knew I wanted to go, and I really wanted nothing to do with Muslim people, because I had this entire body of stereotype that had been fed to me. And this was even pre-September 11th. So it got way worse after that. But I had this whole expectation about what Muslim people were going to be like, and that I wanted nothing to do with them. And then God had other plans for me. I tell people I had a trifecta of falling in love. I fell in love with Egypt, which I knew I was going to. Much to my surprise, my heart cracked open to Islam as a faith path for me. And I converted a year to the day after I arrived in Egypt. And then I met my husband and met his family and got adopted into an Egyptian family. And so my love story trifecta was falling in love with Egypt, falling in love with my husband, and falling in love with the faith, which were sort of three parallel paths. We came back, and I lived in California for a while, raised my kids. My kids were born in California. And then I'm from Rhode Island. We keep ending up coming back to Rhode Island. But in 2009, we decided to move back to Egypt because we wanted my girls, who were then 5 and 7, we wanted them to have some school there, to get the language, to live in the Muslim majority country, to have that experience. Even though we have a lovely faith community here, I wanted them to have that experience. But then the revolution happened in 2011, which was a big social disruption and uprising and attempt for the youth to kind of take back. It actually started as a protest against the police, and then rose to, let's just overthrow the government. And so a lot of what we're experiencing here this year, through the anti-police brutality, the Black Lives Matter movement, all of the different movements that are happening now socially, feels very familiar to me. And it's all been happening in the exact 10-year anniversary of the revolution that happened in Egypt, which started on January 25th, 2011. So, yeah.
I think that most folks in this country take for granted the likeliness that something like that could happen here. I think it's a little more understood since 1/6 that,
Yes.
and I'm sorry that you and your family, had to go through that. And I think that I would like to get your wisdom around telling our stories in a way that help us learn, but also help us heal. Do you have any wisdom around that? Because I have to tell you, I struggle. I just watched, what is it? Judas and the Black Messiah. If you haven't seen that,
I haven't yet.
it's really good. And I struggle with the trauma, like replaying of the trauma, but I understand it's so important for us to know the stories. So do you have any wisdom around how to do this in a healing way?
I really think I want to honor this question because I really think that this is the question of our time. Right? And for me, the word truth just keeps coming into my mind. Like, let's find the truth. And that's so difficult because when we look at what's happening on a national political level, truth is not valued. Authenticity is not valued. That kind of heart communication we've been talking about is not valued. But I feel like that heart communication is what's important. And I know you're really graceful and good at doing this of, we have a temptation to other people, right? And see people as different. And you and I share this experience of when we're confronted with something that feels really painful and really uncomfortable, there's the initial knee-jerk reaction of whatever your biochemistry does. But if we can learn to regulate that and be present with, this isn't happening to me, this is happening for me, right? So this experience is happening for me. And I think back to a story you told me about accidentally ending up at a Trump rally beach event this past summer, right? And it's like, okay, well, I'm accidentally here, but there are no accidents.
Yeah.
How am I going to make the most of this? And what am I here to learn? Because I really believe that, we see the pictures that God wants us to see. And I think that's true no matter what faith path you follow, that you're given these pictures and you're given these stories and you're given these challenges that are part of your life's curriculum, your soul's curriculum. And so we have to embrace them as such. It's like sometimes it's a hard test and we don't want to do it, but how do we be present in that moment of discomfort? And I think about this when we're trying to be allies to each other, which is a really big challenge right now. And I'm finding it's super hard for white women right now. And a lot of the women that I end up working with or teaching to, are kind of Gen X white women who their heart's in the right place, but kind of like where I was almost 30 years ago, didn't really have a clue about how my ancestry was contributing to the ugliness that we're seeing right now. So there's a piece, I feel like compassion is a piece, and I don't mean just compassion for other people, like compassion for ourselves.
Yeah.
If we're going to step into this being the change that we want to see in the world, we're going to mess up and we're going to make mistakes and it's going to feel uncomfortable sometimes. But we can be in that discomfort and step through that discomfort and be part of the healing, and we survive. Like it doesn't break us, it doesn't destroy us. Sometimes that feeling of not being whole inside is us reflecting what's not whole outside. Like I'm looking at your backdrop right now and I'm like, we're in all these sort of fragmented pieces, and how do we come together? And I don't know if that answered your question.
Absolutely. And I'm sitting here like trying like to gracefully wipe tears because because it speaks so, like you said, you said truth telling. So telling the truth, but with compassion,
Mm.
for ourselves, with compassion for one another. And I think that sometimes we're so wounded, we're so wounded that our truth telling comes out in a way that harms, that
Yes.
continues to produce harm. And so we're in this really terrible cycle of continuing to wound one another. And so the last thing that you said, talking about this thing back here, is, yeah, it's fragmented, but guess what? It's all one screen. It's
Yes.
connected. And so,
Yes.
like, community, like, so you just answered it like so perfectly, because in my mind, while I'm asking you the question, I'm also asking spirit, like, confirm this for me. And of course, there you go, you do. And so I'm just grateful, that, sometimes you get in your head, you're like, am I making this up? And this is what,
Right.
but when someone else is on that same wavelength, and
Right.
we're different, like we're
So
different.
different. Yeah.
But when we tap into the oneness, when we tap into that benevolent place of the creator that is in all of us, we quiet ourselves to it,
Yes.
we get the same answer. And so, I know that you are really about building community and belonging, like that's your goal. And you also talk about bridging the social divide. We use the same language. It's
Yes,
so
we do.
great.
Yes.
It's so great. I love it. And I want to see if you have any wisdom about that you can give folks that are listening, how to connect and create relationships, authentic relationships across differences, ideas on how to do it, and also kind of talk about the value that it provides.
Yeah. Hmm. My hope and my vision is that the market gets flooded with so many amazing practitioners to usher people through this process that they have 50 people to choose from and everyone can find the right person. So I guess my first piece of advice would be, this isn't a journey you can do alone, because we create neural pathways that keep telling us the same thing. We have this feedback loop of telling us the same thing. And that feeling that we get of like, oh, we're in danger, if we step out of our comfort zone, we're in danger physiologically, your body will experience that. And if you're just trying to do this on your own, like, it's great, like, read the books, watch the videos, do all of that stuff, but find the places where you can step in and be in conversation with people that you can trust. Kind of back to like my manager, let's talk about Malcolm X together. And at whatever level you're at, some people are at the level where they're just needing to relearn the history because they've been fed a lousy whitewashed version of history and they need to relearn the history. Other people know the history, have relationships with people from different backgrounds, but there's like an emotional growth that needs to happen. And that really happens in community, and that happens in courses, and it happens in masterminds, and it happens in one-on-one conversations with coaches like yourself, who can help people through. And I think there's a piece for me that it's, when we talk about that compassion piece, it's about finding compassion for all the people, because we talk about the othering piece, right? And it's like, okay, white women are Karens, white women are, they don't have a clue. And so that's not an invitation.
It's not.
That's not an invitation to say, come and let's heal this. That's like, oh my God, I'm bad. My ancestors were bad. And I don't know how to show up because I'm ashamed. And there's so much shame in these conversations. So for my own personal healing, I've been trying to look back historically with compassion for all the people. Like when I think about my ancestors who came over on not quite the Mayflower, but the next group of ships that came over, they were traumatized And they didn't come because they were like, we're going to ruin the world with colonialism. That wasn't the intention in their heart, right? Kind of turned out that that's what happened, but that wasn't the intention. Um, and I'm even today looking at what's happening in Texas. The day we're recording today is the day that roofs are collapsing in Texas because of the snowstorm. And I'm thinking, wow, my ancestors 400 years ago landed in December in New England and had to figure out how to survive, so wounded people built this system that we're in, and wounded people are trying to heal the system we're in. Um, so I just dropped into my own heart. The language I've been using, like, I feel like we all have a little house in our hearts where God lives. Like, I think we need to learn how to find that in ourselves and speak to each other from that place. Because then we're all sacred and we're all divine. And it doesn't matter what skin we're born in or what clothes we choose to put on because of our practices. We're all just humans trying to move this thing forward in a way that can heal ourselves and heal the planet.
That was beautiful. And I totally agree with you. I'm right there. And I love that you talked about how even sometimes we who are doing this work, right? Like, there is that habit of wanting to come and speak out of, the way I talk about it is like speaking out of my trauma and not out of the real me, who I really am, which is an extension of God, energy, whatever we
Right.
call that presence. And so I talk a lot about, like, even when you're in conversation with someone who's behaving badly, like, we have to be able to find the God presence in them. And again, that's another reason why I really try to acknowledge people, like, see people for that presence, even in the midst of their woundedness. And it's a practice that we have to every day choose.
Yes.
That's what I'm hearing you say. And I love that you said, no matter what level you're on, it's really important to understand it's a continued work. You need people in your life to hold you accountable and to just be there with you. So I'm thankful that you are here with me and you're
Right.
part of that growth for me. So
Yeah.
thank you.
And I love every time I have conversations with you or someone else who on the surface looks so different from me, that we can find this common place. I think that this is an example for other people that, Black woman from the South and a white woman from New England can come together, and then add the complexity that I've, chosen a different faith path, but we can still come together and find the essence of it, the essence of the spirituality of this whole process. Could I just share a quick story with you? Yeah.
Absolutely.
I have a physical illness that requires me to get infusions once a week. I got very sick, wheelchair. My legs didn't work anyway. It's an illness related to MS. That's not the important part. The infusion that I get once a week is a derivative of blood plasma. And so it comes from people's blood donations, people's plasma donations. And the one vial that I get every single week comes from a batch that came from 10,000 different donors. So 10,000 people's cells come into my body once a week, and they help heal my body. When I started doing that infusion, and I've been doing that for like 7 years now, and I started to realize that it takes 10,000 people, I started to make that infusion a sacred practice. Like, every week, I pray for those 10,000 people. Like, I thank them for taking their time to donate their blood for me, that they're healing me. And there's a whole cycle in that. But the important piece for me is that the details of the lives of those 10,000 people are meaningless when it's at that cellular level. I don't care what color their skin is, who they sleep with at night, who they pray to, whether they're homeless, whether they live in a mansion. Like, it doesn't matter. They're human beings, and as human beings, we have the capacity to heal each other. And
Mm.
I'm witness to that every single week when I surrender to that infusion and give thanks to those 10,000 people who showed up for me.
That's beautiful. That's such a wonderful practice. And again, it just kind of reminds me of our interconnectedness, right? And you physically have been connected with so many people. And I think that, I don't know, in my mind, maybe that's why you're such a saint, why you are, why you are able to really embody this understanding that we are one, we are connected, and want to bring forth healing into our world. Um,
Yes.
yeah, thank you for sharing that. That was beautiful. Is there anything else you'd like to share with us today?
I don't think so. This has been a lovely, deep, meaningful conversation.
It's been wonderful. I was looking forward to it. And I feel completely full, and just blessed to know you and have you in my life in this part of the journey. And you are a coach as well. Can you tell a little bit about your business and what you do? There is no shortage of work. Like this work
Yeah,
needs to be done, and everybody needs to find their person, right? Like,
right.
and so you may be someone out there's person, and I want them to be able to know that and reach out to you. So could you just share a little bit about that?
Thank you. Yes, so there are a few different things that I do, and as the world's evolving, my sense of purpose is evolving, or how I want to show up in my purpose.
Yeah.
I'm becoming aware that I want to have more of these deep, deep, real heart centered conversations with people and work with people who are at that level and just kind of ready to push it to the next level. So one of the entry level offers that I have is something I'm doing in collaboration with acclaimed poet Christopher Johnson, who is a fabulous Black man who acclaimed amazing poet. And he writes about his trauma as a Black man through poetry. And so we are collaborating. Again, one of those situations to see the two of us together, you couldn't even imagine we found anything in common. But we have a workshop that we offer that's available for you to take to your school or to your church or to wherever. It's called Healing the Social Divide. And we teach some of the social science about this healing journey. And then through Christopher's poetry, you get to have a right-brained, heartfelt response. And we offer chances to share and process that. And then we have a deeper level course that we do that's specifically about looking at white supremacy and how we can kind of dismantle that together. I'm also working on a mastermind class called Allies to One Another. And this is specifically for people who are leading people. So the people who other people are looking to them to be like, how do we handle this? Working with those folks on a mastermind level, people who are leading in a variety of different capacities, whether they're elected officials or faith leaders or nonprofit leaders, different people who have maybe hundreds of people who look to them on a daily basis and they're like, I need a private place to figure this stuff out. So that's that. My favorite thing, my favorite offering, which is on hold now because of COVID, is that I try and expand people's people's understanding of their own internalized prejudice and bias by taking them on trips to Egypt. So I do women's retreats to Egypt. We do a lot about looking about how humankind has pursued God forever and how there's evidence of that. And then I invite them to look into their own hearts and find their own relationship with God. And then also look outside and be like, oh, I didn't know the Muslim world was like this. So that will hopefully, we say in Islam, inshallah, God willing, will be resuming in 2022. That's my hope. But yeah, in the meantime, my work's online. And I do have a few spots for one-on-one coaching, but it really has to be the right person and the right fit. I prefer to do group stuff, but if someone's really feeling like, Wendy feels like my person, I do have a couple of spots available for one-on-one coaching.
Awesome. And can you tell us your website as well so that folks know where to
Yes,
reach you?
my website, which is in process of being revamped, but it is called thirdspaceinternational.com. My company is called Third Space, so I'm looking at taking these polarized views and finding a third space. And then coming up, I'm going to have, usually we have the holy month of Ramadan coming up in April, which is one of the pillars of Islam. It's our fasting month, and I usually do a lot of education. So if people want to follow me on social media, Facebook is the best place, Wendy Manchester Ibrahim. And I do have a really cool ebook that I'll be offering about demystifying Islam in the coming weeks.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Wendy. This has been such a wonderful time of just activation and education. And I know that's what you're about. So,
Yeah.
yes. Well, um, deep gratitude for you.
You too.
Thankful for your being. And I will see you next time. Thank you, everybody, for joining us.